What up, everybody? It's Chris Roscoe with Operation Moksha. Today I'm going to be talking about the distinction between polarity and polarization. And the reason I want to talk about the distinction between polarity and polarization is because these words are becoming extremely popular right now. Just like shadow became popular not that long ago, and every few months or so we get this new set of words and set of principles that enter into the zeitgeist of our vocabulary. And people kind of run away with it and say a lot of things about it. Now, this isn't necessarily my area of expertise per se, depending on who you ask about it, but polarity is something that you end up mastering as a result of mastering shadow integration. And the reason that I say this is because shadow integration is essentially an exercise in polarity. And what I mean by that is shadow integration is essentially it's about conflict resolution, which is a polarity issue. You've got two polar opposite sides of your personality, and they tend to be in conflict, and that's what creates most dysfunction and what creates most things that need to be integrated. Where a very common polarity, internal polarity, would be like the desire to go out and take risks and do all kinds of crazy adventurous things and have a really fun, fascinating, and fantastic life. But then the other part of you wants to stay small. It wants to stay safe. It wants to protect you and make sure that you're okay and that you have your needs met and that you're going to be okay into old age and all that sort of shit. And on the surface, it can look like these two things are polarized against each other. But actually, what you can do is you can bring them together and see how they're actually intending to serve the same purpose, which is to give you a healthy and fulfilling lifestyle, and they're both required to do that. That is polarity. And I want to explain this through magnets. These aren't actually magnetic, but this is just what I have on my desk right now. So polarity is when you've got both opposite sides of the polarity facing towards each other, and so they connect like magnets, right? It's like this part of me wants to go out and be adventurous and do all these crazy risk-taking things because that will make my life meaningful if I take the correct risks. And it'll make my life satisfying and fun and fulfilling and all these sorts of things. But then this other part of me wants to stay small. It wants to be safe. It wants to make sure that my needs are met and that I'm taken care of and that like I'm going to be healthy and all sort of stuff. In a polarized relationship, they'll be opposing each other. And it'll look like I have to choose one or the other. As in like I'm just an adventurous person or I'm the stay-at-home kind of person. That's polarization. That's the unhealthy version. Whereas polarity is when you get them to face each other and you see the commonality between the two. And you're able to say, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so there's a time and a place for me to go take risks and have adventure. And then there's a time and place for me to rest and chill and reflect and integrate and take care of myself and all those sorts of things. And so what used to look like a polarizing relationship of pulling away from each other is actually a healthy polarity where they both come together to serve the same purpose, which is giving me the most happy and successful and fulfilling life possible. But they have vastly different and even opposing ways of going about accomplishing that. And that is because it takes both different approaches to be able to create the thing that I'm trying to create, which is a healthy and also satisfying way of life. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at here, where polarity is when they're healthy and they're looking at each other. But polarization is what happens when they go away from each other. And it's just like a magnet. Like in polarity, they will attract each other and they will come together and it will create a union and it'll all work. It'll create wholeness. And that's essentially what you want for your internal world. Whereas polarization pushes away. And you can see this in a number of different ways. If your relationship has a healthy kind of polarization to it, or polarity to it, then you and your partner, or you and your friendship, or you and your business partner, or whatever it might be, will come together. And you will constantly be coming together and creating things from a sense of unity and collaboration and togetherness. Whereas if you have an unhealthy polarization, you can't agree on anything. You see things so differently that you might as well think the other person is fucking crazy. You're living on some other kind of planet or something like that. And that's the distinction between polarity and polarization. And so the real question is, how do you go from polarization to polarity, and what is even the problem with polarization in the first place? Polarization is what happens when you go too far to one side to the point where you have to repress the other. Where let's say you are, because this is how I used to be. I was so afraid of the part of me that needed to rest and needed to recover and stay small and all these sorts of things, because I used to see it as weakness. I was polarized away from it. I was polarized away from it. And so I only wanted to go on adventures. I only wanted to do the big, crazy thing that would make my life seem really, really awesome, because the other thing seemed like weakness, and I didn't want to do the thing that seemed like weakness. And so the way that showed up in my life is I was essentially constantly burned out. I was constantly taking more risks than I could actually handle. I wasn't integrating or processing or reflecting on any of the experiences that I had. They were just kind of building on top of each other until it kind of drove me crazy for a little bit. But now that I'm having this healthy polarity, not rather than polarization, whether I'm having this healthy polarity, I go out and I take risks and I stretch myself and I do all kinds of things. And then I take the time to rest and take care of myself so that I can integrate everything and get myself ready for the next adventure. And so that's the distinction between polarity and polarization in this example, but also in relationships, it shows up in a ton of different ways. And so how do you go from the unhealthy polarization to the healthy polarity? And it's really all about understanding the main underlying values between each side of the polarity. And in the example that I've been working with up until this point, what I'm essentially talking about is the underlying value between the part of me that wants to go out and take risks and explore and experience, and the part of me that wants to rest. What they really want from me is to live a satisfying, healthy, and good life. They just have there's just different things that are required to do that can appear to be opposite. But if you look at the surface level, all you're going to see is what appears to be two opposing viewpoints, two opposing ways of life, and essentially two opposing parts of your personality pulling you in different directions. You will see it that way if you look at the surface level. But if you look a little bit underneath the surface as to what are both parts of me trying to accomplish here? Why does this part want me to rest? Why does this part want me to go and take all these risks? Then you'll find something very fucking different. You'll find, this part of me wants to take risks because it makes me feel alive. It gets me out of my comfort zone. It pushes me to meet new people and to learn new lessons and to be able to do all kinds of things that really just expand my quality of life and my capacity and my ability to enjoy it and all these sorts of things. And on the other side, why do I want to rest? It's because I only have so much capacity. If I'm living outside of my comfort zone to a certain point, eventually that's going to become debilitating. That's not really going to work for me. I'm going to need to reflect on all these lessons that I've learned, and I'm going to reflect on what maybe I did wrong and how to improve it in the future. And all these different things come from being able to rest and take care of yourself and actually get yourself mentally prepared to take the next risk. And so when you look at it underneath the surface as to what is it they're really trying to accomplish, you see that they both have your best interest in mind. And then you can actually just help them come together. And they just for them, helping you is just different things. You have one friend that helps you do this and another friend that helps you do this. And both are essential and both come together to create wholeness and a sense of well-being. And so if you want to get away from the unhealthy polarization in your life and turn it into a healthy polarity, what you really want to be doing there is looking at the underlying needs. First, you need to identify the conflict. What are you polarized against? And you can look at this in politics. You can look at this in spirituality. You can look at this in your relationships. You can look at this in your own life. Like any area in life that you're struggling in, or any area of your life that isn't optimized, or any area of your life that is constantly pissing you off and causing problems for you, like probably the political shit, you're probably trapped in an unhealthy polarization. And so the thing to become aware of there is, what's the conflict? If I hate, let's say I'm a left-wing person and I hate right-wing people, or I'm a right-wing person and I hate left-wing people, what's the polarity there? Or what's the polarization there? What exactly is the conflict? What am I saying versus what are they saying? And then why am I saying what I'm saying? And why are they saying what they're saying? And what's the common goal between the two that we can potentially come together on? Same thing with relationships. In most relationships, there's somebody who embodies the masculine pole and there's somebody that embodies the feminine pole. And oftentimes these things can appear to be in conflict, and they can appear to oppose each other and create a lot of problems. Whereas if you, like for me, I generally tend to embody the masculine pole in my relationship, and my girlfriend tends to be more feminine. And so we get into these things where it seems like we're speaking entirely different languages, and nothing she says makes any sense to me, and nothing I'm saying really makes any sense to her. And so this is how you can tell that you're locked into an unhealthy polarization, where the polarity is, okay, what am I saying? Why am I saying it? What is she saying, and why would she be saying that? And really genuinely trying to understand why the other person is doing what they're doing and saying what they're saying and where they're really coming from. And if you can get clear on really where they're coming from, most of the time you'll be able to see a different approach to the same problem that you're trying to solve. And if you can find that common ground, that underlying value and that underlying meaning behind why they're doing what they're doing, you can align on that and start to turn your unhealthy polarization into a healthy unifying polarity. Now, the actual process of this is a little bit more detailed and complex when you actually get into the nitty-gritty of it. So if you are locked in a kind of conflict that you need a little bit of help turning from polarization into polarity, then let me know, because I'd be absolutely happy to help you do that. Or if you just have any questions about what the fuck I just said, let me know. Because this is a deep conversation. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. And I'm personally seeing all these different ways show up in the way that everybody's teaching about it. And so I wanted to come to this from a shadow integration perspective and from my own opinion, from the deepest perspective that you really can analyze this stuff. Because in my opinion, all polarity is internal. And so if you have a healthy polarity with something outside of you, it's because those two parts of you have a healthy polarity inside of you. Whereas if you have a unhealthy polarization with something outside of you, it's probably because it's representing an unhealthy polarization inside of you. And so I think this is really keen technology to really change our world in a lot of different ways. It'll make your relationships better. Like, imagine if this polarization of the political sphere turned into polarity, and we could come together based on common values and common meaning and common themes and work together using different approaches to solve these problems. Like, imagine what the world would be like. Imagine if all relationships were like that. Imagine if every single part of your personality was like that. That's what's possible when you go from polarization to polarity. And it's just simply a matter of being willing to listen to both sides until you can understand where they're really coming from and what they're really trying to accomplish. And the problem with that is that can be challenging, that can be difficult, that can be scary, that can be really hard. It can crumble your identity to consider what somebody on the other side of any kind of spectrum is saying to you and why they might be saying it. You might have to give up some of your most deeply held, not really convictions, but your most deeply held ideas about the world. Or sometimes your most deeply held convictions, if they're unhealthy, you could be convicted in unhealthy things, but you may have to give up some element of your identity, of what makes you feel safe in the world in order to understand why somebody who opposes you would be saying what they're saying. It can be a very challenging thing. But ultimately, in my personal opinion, very few things, if anything, is more rewarding than that. Both on a personal level, on a collective level, on a society level, and just on a human level. There's so much to gain. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of real shit you could lose, but none of it's worth keeping anyway. So in my opinion, we really only have a lot to gain by really exploring the distinction between these two and really hearing each other out. So that's really all I wanted to say about this. If you have any questions, let me know. Stoked to be doing a video again. I love you, and I'll see you next time.